This video is brought to you by my supporters on Patreon. Okay, hi guys, so I'm here partway through working on the Sakura hat, and I didn't record the earlier parts because I wasn't sure if I wanted to make a video on this or not. So I decided I am, and I'm going to show you guys what I did to make this. Because her hat's such an odd pattern, I didn't want to waste a bunch of tape and materials and stuff to basically create the shape of the hat that I wanted and then do like the duct tape method but like to my size. So instead I made this right here, which is like half her hat, as you can see, because I only needed like one half of her hat because it's the same on the other side. To make this I used a bunch of tissue paper and just shaped it and then put tape around it and built on it until I got the shape of the hat that I wanted. Adding stuffing paper, more tape, stuffing paper, more tape. You can kind of see like the layers of everything in here. And once I was happy with that, I wrapped this in saran wrap or plastic wrap, and then I taped it with duct tape, and then I used a Sharpie, and on the duct tape I drew on all of the seam lines where there were bends and everything to make sure that the pattern would lay flat. And I labeled it, of course. And then I cut it off of this and I cut it into these little pieces that you see here. So now I had a tiny little hat pattern. To translate that into this size pattern, I actually used a little bit of math this time. I took the circumference of my head and then divided that into 4, since there's going to be 4 parts to this hat. What I got was each section had to be 6 inches to come to a total of 24 inches. I drew a line for the bottom where this hat is. That's 6 inches. I measured the bottom. So I know this bottom needs to be 6 inches. I measured how big this bottom piece is in the mock-up that I made, which is about 2 inches. So that means 2 inches in these patterns equals 6 inches in the full-size pattern, which means 1 inch in these patterns equals 3 inch in the full-size pattern. So now I have a measurement guide to go off of. So for every inch in this, it's 3 inches on this. So then that just meant I had to start taking measurements. So I need to adjust this a little bit because I stuck it out a little bit too far. To adjust it, I'm taking this, I'm measuring this piece right here, and it looks to be about 3/4 of an inch. So I times that by 3, and that's 2.5. And I need to adjust that so that's in a little bit more. So like right here. So far this lines up pretty well. I didn't have to really move the line. I just needed to take it in because I stuck it out a little bit too far. I do need to adjust these darts. If I remember right, these darts were both 1 inch wide, yep, which means that they're 3 inches. So I need to take this dart in to right here. So this should look like a big version of this piece. To create the arch, I don't really have math for this. I guess I could measure it this way, which actually might be a good idea. So let's do that. Where's the highest point? Like right here? So 2.5 inches times 3, which means this needs to be 7.5 inches at the tallest. Oh, and it is. I'm pretty good at eyeballing stuff, guys. This is 7.5 inches at the tallest point. So we got the front part patterned, as you can see here. And now we just have to do the same with all the other pieces. These 2 points line up, which means this helps me figure out my angle a little bit better. This is about 1.7. And let's figure out how big that branch is. 1.25 times 3 equals 3.75. here, I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to measure from that green line on here. It's 1/2 inch on here, which means it's 1.5 inch on here, which means it should be somewhere out here. It curves, so we're going to curve it. And again, for the curves, I just wing it. And that looks about right. Okay. Alright guys, so my camera died and I don't really have time to not work on things, so I went ahead and drew up the rest of the patterns, and I'm just going to quickly talk about what all I did. Okay, so you kind of saw what I was doing with these two patterns, how I was measuring everything. These ones were pretty easy and straightforward because they were like the bottom of the pattern, so they had at least one flat straight line. Most of the rest of the patterns don't have straight lines, so to work with. Everything has a curve to it, which can get a little tricky because, like, how do you make the base of the pattern and figure out the height of things if everything's curved? This is kind of when I just used a little bit of guesswork. This piece is pretty flat, to be fair, on one side. However, it does have a slight curve that is kind of hard to see on the tape pattern, but when I was holding it up, I noticed that it curved ever so slightly. It probably actually curves a little bit less than that, but it does curve on the outside, and it does curve like way in right here. So to start off, I figured out this length, the length of the most flat or straight edge, and drew that down, which is this line right here, this green line. Then I ignored the curves and just went from point to point and drew this green straight line on either side. And then I just eyeballed the curve, looking at this as best as possible. I noticed on this piece it curved more up here, and it was slightly curved, whereas this side curved more towards the bottom, and it was way more curved than this side. Once I figured this out, I found the half point on both of these, and then measured this way, up and down, and figured out the height on the inside here and made a little marking. And then I measured 1/4 of the way on either side, and then made another marking to figure out those heights. However, I did it off of the green line at first, so I kind of just had to bump it all up a tiny bit to accommodate for the curve of the bottom piece. And then after that, all I had to do was connect the dots. There were 3 dots for me to connect to, and that helped me get this curve. It's kind of similar to how we did this curve earlier, which was the same thing, where I just measured the height, put a dot, and then met the curves, and tried to just mimic the shape that I have here as best as possible. So these all worked pretty much the same way. This one was a little bit more tricky because it curves big time on all sides. So I measured across here first, which is where this piece. So I measured across here and drew this line, and then I measured across here from point to point, ignoring the curve, and drew that line. Measured across here, ignoring this curve as well, drew that line, and then the same with this side, drew that line, so I had a square to work within. And then I started with this curve, since this has the least drastic curve here. I kind of just winged this curve, decided that curve matched this pretty well. I took that measurement, matched it here, put a dot, and then drew my curve in here. And then I just curved the edges, winging it again.
And that's pretty much it. That's how I made these patterns. It was a little bit of math, a lot of just eyeballing and winging it to try to mimic the shapes as best as possible. And in the end, it worked out pretty well. So hopefully you guys found this video useful. Thanks for watching. Have a lovely day, and bye!